Good afternoon and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Audit Committee of Allerdale Borough Council. My name is Lee Jardine. I'm the Democratic Services Officer, and for the purpose of this meeting, I'm also the host. I'll be assisting the committee with the use of technology to manage the process of the meeting. I will not have any control over the meeting, and the meeting will not begin until instructed by the chair. The meeting is currently being live streamed on YouTube, and a recording will be made available afterwards. Everyone has indicated they're attending and now joined, and we'll start with some introductions. So with the members first of all, Councillor Bainbridge.
Good afternoon. Councillor Mary Bainbridge.
Councillor Armstrong.
Good afternoon, Councillor Carol Armstrong, Harrington Salterbeck Ward Councillor.
Councillor Campbell-Savers.
Councillor Marcus Campbell-Savers, Keswick Wood.
Councillor King.
Good afternoon, Councillor King.
Councillor Tyson.
Afternoon, Councillor Alan Tyson, and I'm chair of this meeting of the Audit Committee, so welcome.
And now we'll move on to the officers. Paula McKenzie.
Good afternoon, Paula McKenzie. I'm the Assurance Risk and Audit Officer.
And we have our colleague on the meeting from Grant Thornton, Richard Anderson.
Good afternoon, I'm Richard Anderson. I'm the External Audit Manager for Grant Thornton.
Thanks very much for all your introductions. I'll now hand you over to the chair to formally start the meeting. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Lee. So we will now start the meeting. Agenda item 1 is minutes of the 24th of November meeting, pages 3 to 8 in your agenda. Have I a proposer and a seconder for these minutes?
I'll propose them.
I'll propose them, Alan, thanks.
Okay. And it's Carol.
I'll second them.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So we're proposing a seconder, and if anybody that has any objections, we'll just can they sort of show their hand or speak now? Right, well, we seem happy with that. So we'll go on to item 2, which is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies today from Councillors Hodson and Kirkbride. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Declaration of interest, item 3. Councillors or staff to give notice of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable interest, or any other interest and the nature of that interest relating to any item on the agenda in accordance with the adopted Code of Conduct. No.
Doesn't appear to be any, Chair.
Silence, okay. Item 4. Questions. To answer questions from members of the public submitted in writing or by electronic mail no later than 5 p.m. on a working day, allowing 2 clear working days before the day of the meeting.
No, Chair, we have no questions.
No questions, okay. So we're now on to agenda item 5, which is the Assurance, Risk and Audit Report for the quarter ending 31st of December, and I'll hand you over to our RA Officer Paula for that.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, as the Chair said, this is our Assurance, Risk and Audit Report for the quarter ending the 31st of December, which is our quarter 3. And it's to inform the committee of the work performed by the audit team in the 3rd quarter. I'm happy to take any questions through the chair, either at the end or as we go. So if you just address them to the chair and I can answer them as you like. So if we go to point 2 of the agenda, the report shows the performance against the audit plan, the cumulative performance up to quarter 3. The end of quarter 3, that is, was 73.43%. This is just below the planned target of 73.72%. However, this is still considered very, very good based on the challenges that the team faced. which included a high volume of annual leave leading up to the Christmas period and over the Christmas period. The team also remained under-resourced in Q3. As the committee know, there was just myself at that point. I am glad to say that the next quarterly report, it should be different because Alison is now back within the team as of January. So unless there's any questions, I'll move on to point 2.3. Okay, so moving on to point 2.3, it refers to the annual PSIAS self-assessment, which is done annually. This has been completed and it's Appendix 1. This shows an overview of the compliance for Allerdale Borough Council's Assurance Risk and Audit Service. I would like to point out to the committee that the self-assessment that has been attached is the draft assessment, and it has been updated since then. So let me just find that. I know the committee were sent the updated self-assessment prior to the committee, but I will just quickly go over those points that are different if the committee would like, just so I can point out exactly which parts have changed.
I think the chair might want to speak, Paula. Sorry.
Yeah.
He's on mute. Chair, you're on mute.
Okay. What I was saying, Paula, was perhaps that report comes on page 15 at the end of your report, so perhaps we could sort of explain the difference then. And if you want to show the difference, so perhaps we could just finish your report first. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so moving on to point 3, the assurance and consultancy activities. And as you can see from the report, on this quarter, we managed to finish last year's financial services audit and the culture and ethics audit. The waste services, the ICT, and this year's finance review are all in progress. And obviously we'll discuss the final reports at the end, but as you can see, Appendix 1 and 2, 2 and 3 on the report are the financial services and culture and ethics final reports. And both we were very, very happy with. There was no major concerns raised, and it was a very, very good review on both parts. So if I move into point 4, which is our corporate fraud, I'm very pleased to report that all of our data sets have now been submitted and our information is there ready to do the actual check-in of the NFI data. The team worked extremely hard to get all of those submitted. This year we did have a lot extra to submit. We had to submit an additional exercise that the NFI wanted, and we also had to submit our grants information. So the team did excellent to manage to do those additional data sets, given that they were working on the grants at the time and doing their normal day-to-day work. As you can see from the report, there was one data set that was submitted after the deadline, and it was just due to resource. It was just due to the fact that they had additional data sets to do. They were working on the grants and the daily jobs, that it wasn't submitted till after the Christmas period. However, we did write into the NFI to explain that, and they were more than happy with our response, and there hasn't been any charge for that late data set. There were more, in fact, we actually got an email, the team that do it, to say what fantastic work we'd done and how hard the team had worked. So that was a really nice email to receive from the NFI. So yes, those matches will start to be worked on as of February, and then the teams will just work through their own matches, and there'll be an update once that has been done. As you can see, I have been supporting the grants team in regards to any fraud work that has come up. And as you can see within the report, there was one instance of suspected fraud, which the team found straight away, and that was forwarded to the relative authorities. And we did find that that was across local authority boundaries fraud, which that means that the same fraud had been tried to be committed in other authorities, and I believe it was Carlisle, Copeland and Eden. But that was reported, and you know, it just shows that the assurances what we've got in place and the key controls were working effectively. So that was excellent that the team found that, and it didn't go any further. Moving on to point 5, which is progress with the annual plan. As you can see, and as was mentioned earlier, financial services is currently in testing, ICT is in testing, and Allerdale Waste Services is at the system controls evaluation stage. These are audits that were all in progress at the end of December. The financial services and the ICT is due to be finished by the end of March. Allerdale Waste Services and the revenues and benefits, which has been started now, they will either be the end of March or they'll be carried forward, which is the likely outcome, into the follow-up for the next year's plan. So yeah, that's all on target from an audit point of view. So 5.2, management acceptance of recommendations. I'm very, very happy to say that due to the hard work of the managers and the heads of service coming together to try and get these, you know, to a reasonable figure, for the first time I can say that we have 0 outstanding agreed actions. They've all either been updated or we've agreed a way forward, or they've been completed. So I'm very happy to report that as of Q3, there was no outstanding agreed actions, and hopefully that'll continue going forward. Moving on to point 6, which is the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme. Again, nothing to update the committee on. I'm still hoping that the IIA will be running the CIA in April, and I can do that remotely. But obviously, it just depends what happens with COVID and lockdown and whether they can run that qualification remotely. But as far as I'm aware, it's still available to go ahead in April. Risk management, the performance report is attached for councillors to look at whenever they need. And there's no further updates with that. And unless there's any questions from the committee and going through the appendices, obviously the recommendations are that the report be accepted and that the annual public sector internal auditing standards self-assessment be considered by the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Now, I'd just like to commend you on the fact that I know you've worked very hard to get that action list down, and congratulations with that. Has anyone else any questions?
Yeah, Councillor King's raised their hand.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Councillor King. Janet?
Sorry, I've got round to put my hand up but not unmuting, sorry. I've got quite a number of questions, so I hope that's okay to put them now. Just for my information, really. So again, it's to do with the report summaries. There's quite a number of tasks that have been flagged up which need addressing, but don't seem to have a time scale, and often have comments about what's not been done, but there's no action recommended to address this. So I was wondering in future reports Can there be a short plan of action against each of those, which include who will carry it out and the timescale for completion? Otherwise, there's a further risk that these tasks will slip through the net or be carried forward to future reports. What's everyone's thoughts on that?
Yeah, these, can I ask, Janet, these are applying to basically to Appendix 2 and Appendix 3, I guess.
Yes, so Appendix 2, 3, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, perhaps we can mention those at the time. Although you've said it now, haven't you? We can make the point again at the time, yeah. So what we would be doing now is proceeding to the PSIAS report, and I think Paula, you're going to say something about that, aren't you? That I stopped you saying before.
Yeah. So the changes that are in the final assessment, as opposed to the one that you received, I will point those out just so you can see how minimal those changes are. So if you go to page 23 of the report, so that's 3.2 of the self-assessment, and it's page 9 of the self-assessment and page 23 of the audit report.
Yeah.
And if you go to it's the second one down, and it says, does the chief executive or the equivalent undertake, countersign or contribute feedback to the review and performance appraisal of the CAE?
Yes.
Yeah, so on your report, it has a answer that is, no, this is completed by the Chief Officer of Place and Governance, who would request feedback from the CEO where required. We've actually, and it obviously is partial because of that, we've decided going forward that we will do that. There's no reason not to do that. There is the opportunity now. It's just not actually requested. So we've changed that to a yes, and we've added feedback opportunities on a one-to-one basis at every pre-meeting, which is 4 to 6 a year. That's what yours says. And on the, let me get my updated one up.
Thank you.
And the updated one is now feedback opportunities on a one-to-one basis at every pre-meeting, 4 to 6 per year. This will be sought going forward. So it's just, rather than just having the head of service, we will now ask, you know, the chief executive or the chair to look into that.
Right, okay.
So that's that one. And if we go to 3.3 of the self-assessment, which is page 12 of the self-assessment, which, let me just trying to go between both on the screen. So it would be page 26 of the report. And it is, let me just find that for you. It is about, after 3.3, it's 1, 2, 3, the fourth down, which says, is the CAE responsible for recruiting appropriate internal audit staff in accordance with the organisation's human resource process? On your report, it's partial, and it says partly, currently the head of service is taking responsibility for recruitment. However, we have changed that to read, it now is a yes, we comply, and it says the CAE is responsible for recruiting appropriate internal audit staff in accordance with the organisation's human resources process. However, the post is currently vacant, and so the responsibility is currently with the head of service. So what we're saying there is currently that post is vacant, but if it was filled, they would be responsible. At the moment, it's with the head of service because the post is vacant. So we do comply with that. And the next one is, let me get the agenda back up. It is page 13, so just the one below, so page 27 of the report, page 13 of the self-assessment. We're still on 3.3, and that was for or did that one not change? Sorry, I think that one maybe didn't change in the end. Oh, sorry, it did. The second one down, do internal auditors have sufficient knowledge of key information technology risks and controls? In there, it says the Assurance Risk and Audit Officer covered a module in the IIA cert, and external support is engaged via the MIIA. We just changed that wording to make it more clear that we do get external auditors to cover that for us, that have the expertise. So the wording changed to, it stayed the same, but what we added is Allerdale buy in external expertise to undertake the annual review and provide assurance via the MIIA. So it was just to make it more clear that we do get that external review done by expertise who have ICT qualifications. And the last one was page 30 of the self-assessment, and that would be page 44 of the report. And that was, no wording changed, but the first one, we changed the partial to a yes, because as you can see from our evidence, we do fully comply with that. So internal auditors do not take ownership of risk management. Corporate risk management facilitation no longer sits with the team and is now with the hub manager. So, you know, we comply with not taking ownership of risks. We are risk facilitators.
So is that page 40 or?
Page 44 of the audit report.
Yeah.
44, yeah.
Right, thank you.
Page
So
30 of
yes, that's
yeah.
a yes in the yes column, yeah.
Yes, nothing changed it. We did comply fully, and we just put it in partially as an oversight.
Understand.
And that was all of the differences. So as you can see, very, very minimal. It was more just to word it slightly different so that it would explain better what our assurances were and what position we were in as a council. So yeah, we were very happy with that. That went out to consultation with our chief executive and the head of governance for comments. And apart from them minimal ones, that was our self-assessment, which obviously is just to show the committee where we get our assurances from and how we deal with those questions.
Right. Now, am I on mute? No, I'm okay. So could I ask then if we have any questions on the PSIAS report as it stands?
Chair, Councillor Campbell Savers.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks, Chair. I was wondering if Paula could just give us a little bit more of a background to what this task is, how she approaches it, a little bit more of an introduction to it. I should have tried to get my hand up before we started that section, but just a little bit more background. You know, where does this criteria come from, and how long does it take you, and who participates in it? How it's structured would be really useful. Thanks.
Of course, Chair, thank you. So basically where it comes from is every 3 years, our internal audit have an audit done on them to make sure that we're complying and that we're doing everything that we should be doing. And this is where this came from. So it's something that has to be done annually. We weren't doing it previously 3 years ago when we got audited. It was something that we didn't do, so we had to show how we provided all these things separately when we got audited. And so from there, one of the recommendations was that we do this self-assessment annually, and obviously it's based on our standards, our public internal audit standards, and that's where this actual format came from. It's a set of questions that is from our IIA public audit standards, internal audit standards, and we have to go through each of those questions and say whether we comply, partially comply, or don't reply, and then we have to give our evidence for that. Obviously, as you can see, some of them, it's slightly different to each authority, because each authority fills in the exact same questionnaire, self-assessment questionnaire, but our authority, for example, is very, very small. When we are to full capacity, we have 2.5 staff. So therefore, there's certain things that we can't do the way that you would do it. For example, it says that we don't do the same audit 3 years in a row. However, this year, obviously, I was on my own for a considerable amount of time, so I was having to do those audits, even though I have done them previously. So yes, it's something that was recommended from an audit that was done on audit, and it comes from our public sector of internal audit standards. The format is the set format, and we fill the same one in every year, obviously, unless that changes.
Okay, thanks, Paula. Any more questions? Well, have you finished, Marcus?
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate it's a self-assessment. Is it standard in other local authorities for it to be completed by people in your position of your own work? Is it something which would be done by other people in the organisation?
As far as I'm aware, it is it's the internal audit manager's role. Obviously, I'm acting, I'm doing part of that role, so it would fall to me, seeing as I'm the only one in the department. But yes, it is usually the, or at least they have the most involvement in it. It does go through to consultation for comments and for changes and amendments to our chief executive, because obviously he's the main risk manager of Allerdale Borough Council, and it goes to our head of service, as audit's head of service, which is Sharon, who can, comment, amend. Obviously the information is attached, but as far as I'm aware, it has always been completed by the head of internal audit. However, that is something I can go away and check with the other authorities, just to make sure that is a consistent approach. But as far as any that I've seen and what I've been involved in the past, it's always been the head of audit, because I think what it's trying to show is it's trying to show the chief executive, the head of governance, and the board exactly where we're getting our assurance from and how we do those things. These are a set of standards that are a national set of standards for all audit services. And so, for example, if we're not complying with them, it flags to the authority and to yourselves issues that we have if we're non-compliant with a number of them that we should be. That's where it would give you the opportunity to come in and say, why aren't we doing this? If we don't do this, how do we get our assurance? And it's kind of a bit of it's information to remind those who aren't involved in the daily processes exactly how we do that. So it's kind of providing you assurance on where we get our assurance from, and just a reminder of how we do that as a council, which is obviously the internal audits services section's role for the council.
Right. Are there any more questions?
Chair, if I could just add add there. If Paul, if you could check that, that would be wonderful. I wondered if it would be appropriate to ask if Richard's familiar with this particular format and whether he has any experiences of other authorities using this and how they approach it.
I'd have to come back to you on that, just to discuss with colleagues. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I'd be able to do a little bit of research and give you a flavour of what's happening elsewhere.
Thank you very much. Thanks to both of you.
I'll definitely follow that up to see who completes that on behalf of the other councils. Obviously, we are in a Lancashire district group, so I can certainly flag that with them because they'll all complete this. I appreciate Richard will look into this. However, it's an internal audit standards, whereas Richard is obviously external, so they won't have to complete this from their point of view. However, some of his colleagues may be aware of it from when they've been involved with internal audit and things like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Lee, have we anyone else with the hand up?
It doesn't appear to be that way, Chair, no.
Okay. No. Well, I'd just like to say I went through it in some detail and actually found it very useful, telling me what I should be doing. And so I'm certainly going to look through again and make sure that we can pick some of these up next year, next time. Okay, so thank you very much, Paula, for that.
No problem, Chair. So
right.
if everyone's happy, I can go to the Appendix 2 and 3, which are the reports.
Yes.
Yep, perfect. So the first report is the Financial Services Review from 1920. As you can see, there was only 2 recommendations, which is excellent. That shows how substantial
that's page 61 to 72, isn't it? Appendix 2. Yeah, Appendix 2, page 61 to 72. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there was only 2 recommendations, which was excellent. The first one, obviously, agreed action 1, which refers to the organisation should identify the training needs of individuals, budget holders, and implement a formal training programme and manual that results in budget holders taking full responsibility and accountability for their budget management. It is important that all budget holders understand their role in delivering the financial and transformational strategic priorities of the council. I would like to point out that this isn't saying that they didn't know how to manage their budget and forecasting and their general budget management, because they did. There was no issues with that. This is specifically saying in regards to the financial and transformational strategic priorities of the council, trying to say that going forward, obviously there's big savings to be made, and it was that extra and that more transformational, the additional things like how that contributes corporately to the transformational savings that they didn't get involved in. You know, at the moment it's very, each person does their own budget and it's very focused on the forecasting, the salaries and the budget setting. There's nothing further that, you know, gives them or shows that they have the knowledge that they realise how that affects the organisation as a whole on the transformational savings that a need met. So I do want to say it wasn't in regards to, which I think some people may think, they couldn't do their own budgets and forecasting. That wasn't the case. There was no major issues with that. As you can see within the report, there was little issues that were brought up, but they were all sorted or accepted, and that's why there's no recommendations. This one is very specifically in regards to the transformational strategic priorities of the council and the budget and forecasting around that. So we were saying that it would be good to give them training to try and get them to understand and contribute to that.
Right. So the overall rating of substantial, it basically didn't affect it.
No, the rating is including the issues found and any recommendations made, it was substantial because budget and forecasting were fine. We just would like them to have that going forward, that additional knowledge of how budgets and forecasting can affect, you know, those savings that are needing to be made from the council, instead of just solely looking at departmental forecasts and budgets. So it was more of an additional, you know, get them in that forward thinking and get them being able to understand how that contributes going forward. And the only other recommendation was in regards to benchmarking. As you can probably tell from the report, we don't really currently do much benchmarking as a council. And so this recommendation, again, it was more of an improvement to say, you know, opportunities to benchmark should be corporately encouraged and utilised where possible. This should include analysis of resources, IT equipment and costs. All it's saying is going forward, we should benchmark more as a council when we're looking at costs, when we're looking at savings, when we're looking at new projects and how other people do it, to take the opportunity to do that benchmarking work. And I'm really pleased to say it's already started. They're already having meetings. They're already looking at what information can be benchmarked and discussing things like that. So on both recommendations, they were really well accepted, and you know, things are already starting to happen in both those cases. So it was a really good review from our audit point of view.
Now, benchmarking is on page 70, but Councillor King has her hand up to ask some questions,
Yeah.
and I think it might be a bit earlier than that. So, Councillor King.
No, thank you, Chair. Yes, it was just regarding the budget monitoring, really, where you were saying that people did understand it, but it would appear that there's elements of it that they didn't understand. Where it says here about the survey sent to budget holders evidenced only 4 out of 16 had full understanding of the level of savings of their area, 3 having little understanding, 1 having none. 9 out of 16 fully understood the process of budget setting and forecasting, leaving 7 with some to no understanding. So it would seem that the manual with guidelines for the budget holders would be extremely useful, or more than useful, essential. And also maybe it needs to include some advice on general budget management, as well as producing the reports for any non-finance managers.
Yes, so I will say that that survey, that specific questions, it was relating to, as you said, the savings for the whole organisation, not their departmental budgets and forecasting, which they do. It was more in regards to, do you understand how your budget and your forecasting contributes to the transformational savings of the organisation as a whole? Do you understand how that contributes to the savings that are needing to be made? And that's where this recommendation comes from, because they absolutely understood their budget, so they understood their forecasting, their savings, their salaries, how they could offer up savings, how they could then ask for money when they needed it. That was understood. What they absolutely admitted to was that wider organisational savings, how their budget, especially some that were very, very small, then contributed to the, for example, if the council was needed to save £1 million overall, how their budget could contribute to that. It was that further understanding of the council's accounts and budget savings as a whole, rather than they weren't saying, I don't understand my budget. However, what I would say is, as part of the review, we did look at whether they had the general management guidance and training for the general budget and forecasting. Even though we didn't have a huge issue there, there was a slight issue which is raised in the report that for example, some have very volatile budgets, and so because of that, they have a lot of analytical data and spreadsheets that goes beside that in order to help them. So there was the case that the accountants were being called on regularly to help with those kinds of things. However, when we looked into that, the accountants said that they were okay with that because it actually helped with the accuracy of work when they were producing their accounts. So in regards to their own budgets, there was no issues. They also did provide process maps, guidance sheets and things like that that are available to the budget holders. So in regards to the general forecasting and budgeting, those things do exist. There was a few that needed updated that they said they would update. But they are available, whereas the more detailed information on how, once their budget and forecasting is done, how that then, where that then goes financially and how that contributes, and how, you know, if they do have a saving and it's not offered because they hope that next year they can spend it, how that affects the ongoing budget. And that's where these manuals and trainings will come in extremely handy. I mean, just from speaking to them, I mean, it's up to them how they then take this recommendation and do it. However, from speaking to them, I was very, you know, happy that they do understand what needs done, and I think they probably will look at it as a whole, because it'll make more sense having one document that explains the whole process rather than having 3, 4, 5 documents for different things. And I think that's where, you know, they will update the existing ones, and they'll incorporate that into how we can as a council make those transformational strategic savings and council priorities that we've said we're going to do, which are the things that we need to do, and how they can contribute and help towards that.
Thank you.
No, there is a second hand up, but it doesn't say who. Is that you again, Janet?
Councillor Bainbridge, I think.
Oh. Yes, I've just got a 2 on against it. So would someone else like to come in with a question?
Yeah, it's Councillor Bainbridge, Chair.
Yes, I would like to come in. Yeah, I mean, I was going to comment on some of the things that Janet's actually commented on, but I will also say that this sort of document is actually going to be seen by the public, and when they read this, they'll probably think something similar to us. And to be fair, you know, they aren't going to see this explanation, and they aren't going to watch this necessarily, and it doesn't read good. But I'm also going to go back to page 65 as well. It starts with job descriptions, and if you look at right from the very start, even in the job descriptions, it doesn't really mention hardly anything to do with budgeting and financial management and actual forecasting and things. And so surely when we're recruiting people, we want to ensure that they have the expert knowledge and experience to do what they're doing. And although I know, Paulie, you've said this relates to something specific, you can't tell that by reading this report. And so it does look like people do not know what they're doing. And I know I've said it to you before, but you've got to look at it from everybody's point of view. And just coldly reading that, it looks as though people don't have the ability to do it. So I don't know what you can do to change it, but it just doesn't read and make people feel comfortable that they are fully compliant in what they're doing. And that's why when you see substantial, it just makes you wonder, should it be substantial? So I can understand why people have looked at it and thought, you know, this isn't quite right. So I don't know whether you agree with that, but that's how it looks. Thanks,
yeah,
Paul.
I think as we discussed in the pre-meeting, Mary, where you did raise this with me, I did try to explain that it's very, very difficult to show the committee how much back work and analytical work go into all of these reports. I did share it with you and the chair, the full SCE and all the testing, which I'm sure you agree is absolutely substantial. So trying to get all of that information into a report that is trying to put in very brief terms the main issues found can be quite difficult at times, especially when you're referring to for example, budgets and forecasting, which is addressing a whole range of areas. So we did look at the general budget and forecasting. We did look at the general understanding and documents around that. But then we also looked at, now that, you know, that's the way we're going as a council, we went a bit further and looked at, okay, so do they then understand how that affects that transformational saving of the council priorities? And it was that where, you know, we realised that there wasn't much understanding because there hasn't been that need previously. And as I said to you, we're looking at new ways of doing reports all the time, and I absolutely will take that on board going forward. However, as I said, I think you do have to look at it as a whole for this one. So as I explained to you, the audit opinion is substantial, which shows that in the whole area, you know, there was little improvements to be made, but all in all, we have a substantial opinion, which that should, you know, if you want to ask questions, that's what you're there for. Why was that substantial when this says this? In the reports, what we did is we used to do, you know, all of the good and all of the bad. And I'm sure you remember the reports were significantly long. When we went through consultation with our clients, they said they'd rather just know the main issues. They'd rather just know what needs improved and those recommendations, rather than having big long reports that they don't always fully understand. And I think with this one, I do agree. And as I say, absolutely we'll take this on board going forward. I think reading the report, there is little issues here and there which are absolutely raised, because that's what the consultation said that they wanted to know. But looking at the recommendation, it very much at the end says this is in regards to the understanding of delivering financial and transformational strategic priorities to the council. Unless it had been a really long recommendation that said, please note, this is not in regards to general budget, it's very difficult to get that over, but I will take that on board, and going forward we will try and make it a lot more specific to what that recommendation is absolutely in relation to, even if that is, we do add a note at the end to say, please note, this is not in regards to the general budget and forecasting. However, there is still, from discussions that we've had with the client, that we are saying we still want those little issues that were brought up included in this big recommendation, but there would be no point in making lots of, you know, 5 little low priority recommendations when we can cover it in one. And yes, sometimes getting the wording right to cover 5 things in one can be quite difficult, but I'll certainly take that on board going forward. But, you know, that's what we're here, you know, this committee's for, you know, for you to ask, what is that in relation to? Can that be made more clear? So, yeah.
Right, thanks, Paula. Now, I think we have another question from Councillor King.
Yes, please. It's just picking up on what you said, Paula, about the recommendation. I mean, the recommendation is actually quite succinct, but then we've got quite a few pages which relate to that. And internal audits that I've had to work through in the past, have each had, every task has had a recommendation against it, and maybe that would be something for the future. I know that you're saying that they're small things, and maybe they are, but maybe just a little comment against them to say, like, for example, I was going to say with the job descriptions, which Mary was talking about, is there a timescale for new job descriptions to be issued to those officers with the budget setting and forecasting and monitoring duties? And they should have clear explanations of responsibility and accountability. And so again, where hiring managers aren't clear of the correct wording, perhaps either the finance team or manager could provide that, or the new manual.
So in regards to the job descriptions, as you know from previous audits, if there is a recommendation, we put that. But if it doesn't quite justify a recommendation, as you'll probably be aware from previous reports, we put areas for improvement. So these are things that aren't significant enough to make a recommendation because the risk isn't high enough, but it's things that we've identified in a report. So the job descriptions, what would have potentially been an area for improvement. However, what we do in these audits, we go to the main people, so whether that's the head of HR for job descriptions or the head of services, and we say we've identified that job descriptions, you know, a lot of them are different, some of them don't actually put detailed information about budget and forecasting in, some of them have different information, which is what is told to you there, because we put in the reports everything that was found. However, in this instance, because Mary again brought this one up, we had that conversation and they told us that they want the job descriptions generic. They don't want to have job descriptions, and they've went away from this, that have lots of details in. So therefore, they're accepting that that's the case. They're accepting that in the job descriptions it says you will manage the budget and forecasting, and they're saying that then that will be managed in their appraisals. So if, for example, a job description says, all it says is you'll be responsible for budgets and forecasting for your relevant department, that's what they want. They want it generic and the job descriptions to be very brief rather than detailed, so that, and I think it's pulling away from having people doing specific jobs. When
Can I just interrupt there? I'm really sorry, but again, I think you can have a generic job description, but at the same time, if they've got specific responsibilities for budgeting, that should be made clear. Otherwise, how can they be held accountable if they're not doing the job properly, or they don't know how to do it because it's not clear in their job description?
So the job description does say you will be accountable and responsible for budget and forecasting, which is this. And what was said is, which is how it does happen in Allerdale, hence why there's no recommendation or area for improvement, is that these things, if, for example, their manager felt like they weren't managing their budget, or they didn't understand, or they needed additional training, all these things are brought up and monitored in the appraisal. So for example, if I was a budget holder and my manager didn't think I was doing my budgets correctly, or I was fully understanding, that would be brought up in my appraisal. So they would say, is there any issues? I'm finding these things.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, but if you've got a job description that says effectively manage budget, what does that mean to that person? Different people will interpret that differently. And so again, really it's up to the manager to be specific as to what's required for that post, whether it's by a separate addition to the job description to keep it generic. I'm not sure, but again, I'm not sure what anybody else feels about that. But that's my view anyway.
Okay. Is that okay, Janet?
Sorry, thank you anyway, Paula, very much for that, and thank you.
Chair, we have the monitoring officer on the call now, and I believe she may want to come in.
Oh, apologies, I was just experiencing
Sharon, yeah.
a few issues through that. Yeah, it was just to confirm with Councillor King, obviously what Paula was saying about them discussions about roles and responsibilities happens on a regular basis, and also you know how we do things. The manuals will set out that detail about how that's done, because you're right, everyone needs that clarity, don't they, about exactly what they're responsible for and how you do that. And also as part of them discussions, you know, if support's required or any kind of training and development, and the finance team also do provide that support. So we have one-to-ones with our business partners as budget holders, and they have also training development sessions. So yeah, we understand what you're saying there. It's maybe just done in a different place.
Right, thank you, Sharon, for that explanation. Okay. So who's got the hand up next? Is that yours? I think it must be. Yeah. Lee?
There doesn't appear to be any raised hands at the moment, Chair, unless anyone indicates otherwise. Councillor Campbell-Savers, I believe, may want to speak, Chair.
Right.
Sorry, Chair. Are we open to talk about the next part of the next report on the ethics report?
We'll be proceeding to that now, Councillor Campbell-Savers. So that concludes then the what was Appendix 2, which is the finance audit, and now we'll proceed to, I think it's pages 70 to 79, the ethics report. 71 to 79, yeah.
So the company ethics report, again, another good report. We were very pleased with the findings. The outcome again was 2 recommendations, 1 medium, 1 low. It wasn't my report, however, I am aware of the recommendations, so I will try and answer as many questions as I can. If there's any that I can't, I will go back to the report writer and forward them via email after the committee, but I certainly can answer the questions on the recommendations. So if we go to agreed action 1, which was priority law, and this is all managers to complete managers' assurance statements as required. Is there any questions on that one?
No, this is sorry, under yeah. No, have we any questions on that? This is the area of improvement 1. Yeah, the respective code of conduct should be reread annually.
No, sorry, Chair, I'm just doing the recommendations. I can go over the areas of improvement, but as I said, they're just things that we point out to them. They absolutely don't have to do them, and as audit, we don't follow those up. So we really only try to
I'm sorry, yes.
Look at the recommendation. So it's the agreed action 1, which is in regards to the manager's statements of what great looks like. And as you can see from the report,
I didn't catch that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in regards to the government group. So the government group meets throughout the year to gather evidence and assurance to demonstrate how the council satisfies its requirements of delivering good governance, which is what goes into the annual government statement at the end of the year. And as part of that, the 13 managers complete assurance statements, which is a compliance sheet where they say, yes, we do that, this is how we do that, a little bit like the audit self-assessment, but for their specific roles. However, as you can see, a review of this showed that the return rate was quite low, and of those that were returned, some of them were only partially completed, some of them were fully completed, some of them were, you know, there was not none that were fully completed that we could say, yes, all of those are fully completed and we get that assurance. And that's where this recommendation has come from. So we're seeing that going forward, as part of the what great looks like, which is the appraisal system, this is where this will be done to ensure that they are fully completed. So rather than just relying on the managers returning those, they're actually going to be done in the what great looks like appraisal, so that if there's any conversations that need to be had, or any things that, you know, the manager's not sure about, the head of service can then, you know, do their role and get that assurance that's needed. So we're seeing in future going forward, they'll do this together in the what great looks like system, so that we've got those completed assurance statements that we're comfortable with what the assurance says.
Right, now someone's got their hand up for a question. Lee?
It doesn't appear to be, Chair.
Oh, well, it's not.
Councillor Campbell-Savers would wish to speak. So, members, if you can use the electronic raised hand, it just makes things a bit easier for us. But yeah, Councillor Campbell-Savers, Chair.
Thank you. The first section, processes in place to support a culture of transparency and openness. I noticed the section on the register of disclosable pecuniary interests. There is a reference in there to testing and how this identified that there were some discrepancies between Allerdale forms and those completed by councillors who are dual hatters who also sit on Cumbria County Council. Can you confirm, did somebody do a full test of all of the councillors' forms and check them, or was this just a sample?
Yes, this is on page 75, isn't it? Halfway down.
And following on from that, could someone confirm that those councillors were alerted to that discrepancy?
So is this the first part of?
It is, yeah. I'm sorry, it's one of the areas that only has areas of improvement.
Oh, sorry.
And if you look at the bottom of the second column, final paragraph.
Gifts and hospitality, Paula. It was a very good, I thought it was a very good idea to compare the two councils actually, but you know, county council responses to Allerdale responses.
Paula, what you're looking for is on page 75.
Yeah, I've got it. I was just reading over it. Sorry, Lee. Just
That's all right.
my report, and so it's been a while since I've looked at this. So it says that a register of disclosable pecuniary interest and other registrable interest forms is completed by all elected members. Testing identified that. So I can't imagine, but I can definitely confirm this and go back and look at the audit, that it will be every single person. It's always a sample. We've never as audit, just because of timescale, tested every single member or any single like transaction. We've never tested all. It's always a sample. So I'm assuming a sample of X amount has been tested, and that's where these findings have come from. However, I can certainly forward you those testing after the committee.
Please, if you could. And
sorry, I've completely forgot your second question. There was one which was, were all of them tested, which I very much doubt.
And my follow-up question was, will these councillors have been, will they have been informed of this issue? I notice in the area of improvement, it says that we should consider a way of recording to confirm whether the code of conduct has been read annually by elected members, which would go some way to kind of highlight to individuals and showing us as an organisation that we're aware of that. But if this is a sample, and out of that sample, we've identified 3 councillors who have potentially got, well, 2 have got discrepancies on their form, and one of their forms hasn't been updated since 2017. I would just wonder if that would be grounds for doing a deeper sample hunt. I mean, there might be a few councillors in the meeting today thinking about their register of interest as well.
Yeah, well, normally what we do is we test a sample, and if that sample has significant discrepancies or we found some issues, we then test a further amount of samples. However, it absolutely depends on how high that risk is. As you can see, even though this has been flagged and so it does need addressed, there's no recommendation. And as I was saying before, what we try to see is if it's a significant issue for our risk appetite, we will always raise a recommendation. So if that had been of significant value in our risk score, it would have been a recommendation. It is an issue, so it's an area for improvement. So therefore we suggest to these people, we raise it with our key contact that these were the issues found. This is something we could do to try and improve that. However, it is completely up to that department or that key client to decide whether they're going to do anything about that. But no, from an audit point of view, no councillors will have been communicated with in regards to the discrepancies.
Paula, I think Sharon wanted to come in on that, the monitoring officer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to confirm it was an area of improvement, and actually it did come up in some discussions with members recently. And we discussed, I think it was in December, we had a few sessions around council procedure rules, and part of that was around further guidance. Members were flagging up that they would appreciate some further guidance, and myself, Lee and Lindsay were looking at some examples of so guidance, and then frequently asked questions around it, and what we would complete as part of that register of interest forms. So we are doing a bit of work around that. It's something that Lee and the team are looking at now, and also it's included in the statement of accounts and published. So there is obviously quite a lot of accountability around that.
Thank you, Sharon. And of course, one form was dated, the forms were dated 2017, whereas our election was 2019. So the ones who are purely Allerdale councillors would fill them in, the county councillors would fill one in 2017 for county and one in 2019 for Allerdale. So that might be the cause of some discrepancies.
Chair, if I can just come in on that, sorry. These are an individual responsibility of a councillor as well. We do, if things change, a councillor needs to inform ourselves. So the ones that maybe from 2017 may be current, maybe up to date. But as I said, it's up to the councillor as well to make us aware of changes to any forms. But from just to echo what Sharon says, we are going out soon to all members, and we're also trying to look to put our register of interest electronically, so that members can make changes themselves, and then we publish them. So yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So Councillor King, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, yes. Coming back again to the tiers, where Paula was saying it's optional for departments if they want to improve a particular area if it's lower down on the list. But again, any internal audits I've been involved in, there might be things which are low down on the list, but we still have to get them done within the 12 months. And so is that something that we should put forward, that it isn't actually optional, because if it's flagged up as an area of improvement, it might not be crucial, but it's still worth doing.
What we have to look at, Councillor King, is our risk appetite as an organisation. So if something falls below our risk score and our risk appetite, it's not a recommendation. So there's maybe something to be looked at, whether we want to make areas of improvement less optional and more, you know, we recommend you do this, but it's not a recommendation. But for example, if for example we were to put everything that was flagged in an audit report, because we do flag everything, whether it's, you know, ends up being a recommendation or an area for improvement, or as we discussed earlier, it's something that we've identified, but when we've spoke to the responsible officer, they are seeing, for lots of different reasons, sometimes it wouldn't be financially viable to do, you know, because sometimes...
Sorry, can I just say again, I'm sorry to interrupt, it's not, I'm not suggesting that everything you say should be followed up, but if it's in your report, if it's worth flagging up in your report, then surely that should be an item that should be considered. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we do flag everything up within the audit report, because that's in our public standards that we have to follow. You know, it does say any findings, any issues, any testing should be put in that report to be shown. But if it's not, if it doesn't meet our risk appetite and the risk score is so low that it's not considered a recommendation, then we put it as an area for improvement. But we can't, from an audit point of view, as I say, and as Sharon's pointed out, we do have those discussions, and 9 out of 10 times they are taken forward and work is always done on them. But from an audit point of view, it's not our responsibility to follow those up. It would only be the risks, the corporate risks and the departmental risks to the organisation that we then follow up and make sure that those agreed actions are being undertaken, because we need to, you know, manage and monitor those risks, whereas the area for improvements have fell below what we would class as our risk appetite or our risk score, which we have, you know, our big strategy which explains all of that.
Okay, Paula, the monitoring officer would like to come in again on that and augment your explanation, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that maybe it would be a good idea for us to do a workshop around actually the process we go through, and then how these things get flagged up, and as you say, the levels, and maybe it'd be a good timing now for us to do a workshop with members, and the previous conversation we had where Councillor Campbell-Savers was talking about the process around the self-assessment. Maybe it would be good to pull all that into one session.
I think if members can come back to you on that, Sharon, I certainly think it will be welcome. And I think there's things going forward about the value for money thing with Grant Thornton that we'd also be quite happy to go into in future. Right, but if there's any more questions in this on that particular report, on the ethics report, as long as we're clear, we can go on to item 6. But thank you very much, Paula, which must have felt like a grilling at times. We've peppered you with questions, but don't take it personally in any sense. Thank you. So we're on to item 6 now. And Richard, you've been sat quiet for a while. It'll be given today by Richard Anderson, and Gareth Kelly has apologised because of a personal issue that he couldn't be present today representing Grant Thornton. So, Richard, are you ready?
Thank you, Chair. So this is our regular progress and sector update. I'm going to start talking on the progress side, and that's on fact page 82 on our report page 4. So this is our progress as at today. Obviously, the last time we presented to Audit Committee was our audit findings report in November, and we were, as we highlighted in our audit findings report, we were to issue a unqualified opinion on the accounts and value for money, and that was issued on the 30th November 2020, and that was ahead of the accounts audit deadline. So that was the completion of our 2019-20 work. We're now at the beginning of the process for the 2021 audit, and we're just commencing our audit planning. So in terms of what that entails at the moment, that's kind of initial discussions with officers and management, review of kind of committee minutes and council minutes, and just review of information such as the internal audit reports that have just been considered. So that's really where we're at the moment, very early planning stages, and our more kind of detailed planning and interim audit work will take place in March, and we'll be looking to share an audit plan outlining the risks for the 2021 audit in March. Just as we highlight on this page, myself and Gareth met with your chief executive in January just to discuss the outcome of the 1920 audit and just the issues impacting the council and that might impact our 2021 audit, and that's we did that in January. In terms of our kind of wider offering to the council, each year Grant Thornton holds a financial reporting workshop on kind of like issues which are likely to be relevant to the financial statements, and members of the finance team at the council are invited to that, and that'll run again this year in this month. Obviously, it won't be an in-person workshop, but again, officers have been invited to that, and hopefully that'll be helpful in terms of the accounts for 2021. As was just alluded to, the big change from our perspective this year is around the value for money code. So from the 1st of April 2020, there was a new code of audit practice introduced by the National Audit Office, and the biggest change is around value for money. So kind of three main changes to what you might have heard and seen from our reports in the past. There's actually a new set of criteria that our work will be framed around. That is financial sustainability, governance, and then improvements in economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. It also looks to bring in much more extensive reporting. So in the past, you'd be familiar with us focusing in on one or two significant risk areas. The new code really requires us to provide commentary across the council's activities in these areas. So I think you'll expect to see our reports be a lot more detailed and extensive and wide-ranging, and it will actually see us probably engaging with officers and management from across the council, whereas in the past it might have been more focused in and around the kind of financial sustainability angle. And I think the third real change is that replacing that kind of binary conclusion, whether it's a qualified or unqualified BFM, with a kind of a more nuanced judgment on performance, and really kind of key and hopefully more impactful recommendations coming out of our work. I'll touch again at the end of our report. We just got to go into a little bit more detail as to the changes. But on page 82 of our report, we do link there to the actual code, and obviously it's something myself and Gareth will continue to discuss with you through the course of the year as we present our audit plan and our audit annual report. But just wanted to really highlight to you that that's a key change in our work for this year, and it probably will feel a little different to what you might have heard from us in the past. But moving on to page 83 of our report is the timetable for audit deliverables, I should say. The last deliverable for the 2019-20 audit is the annual audit letter, and that's now been drafted and agreed with management. So we will present that to the next audit committee, which is later in this month. That really just summarises all that was done as part of the 2019-20 audit. In terms of our audit plan, as I mentioned, we'll be looking to share that in March, and also a confirmation of our audit fee will be shared at that time as well. The timetable for the kind of final accounts audit is shown in this report as to be confirmed. Obviously, in the previous year, the accounts deadline was pushed back to reflect the impacts of the pandemic, and again, I imagine that the deadline will be informed by the impact that the pandemic's continued to have on both the council teams and audit teams. So that's why it's reflected as TBC at the moment. But again, this is something we'll continue to update on through the course of the year. The second half of our report is the sector update. I'll just touch on what we cover in the sector updates, and I'm happy to take questions on anything specific or take them away if it's not something I can respond on straight away. So on page 85 of the pack, report page 7, we just highlight a report by the National Audit Office just on the work of audit and risk committees in light of the impacts of the pandemic. So hopefully that is a useful just a signpost to report that might be relevant to members of this committee. Report page 8, page 86, covers the findings of the Redmond review, and this is actually an independent review into local audit carried out by Sir Tony Redmond. The Redmond review was published in September, and MHCLG have subsequently kind of published their response. Just to highlight a few key recommendations which came out of the Redmond review, which are very relevant to our work and also the work of this committee. potentially a new regulator for local audit, scope to revise fees and acknowledgement that the existing fee structure in local audit, that fees were set too low given the scope and challenges associated with doing local audit in the current environment. A suggestion that the accounts and audit deadline should be moved back. Obviously, previously it was at the 31st of July. Redmond suggesting it should be moved to September. And also a suggestion around accounts simplification. There's also a few other areas which kind of impact governance arrangements at local authorities. The potential for an annual report by the external auditor to be presented to full council, so councillors have kind of full sight of it, not just members of the audit committee. Consideration to be given to the appointment of independent members on audit committees. And also formalising a kind of regular meeting between external audit, the chief executive, the monitoring officer, and the chief finance officer. That's something which, is something that we do already as part of our engagement with the council. But again, it's something that was appearing in the Redmond review. So just thought it was worth highlighting the findings from that report, as it, there's elements of it which will impact this year, and certainly going forward, the Redmond review will change the way that local audit is delivered. And I think a number of the changes which have been suggested there we are very, very supportive of.
Richard, could I bring in, I think Councillor Campbell-Savers has read the Redmond review in detail, and he probably wants to ask one or two questions. Is that so okay?
Yeah.
Right. Marcus, are you ready?
Well, you've given me a bit of a drum roll to follow there, haven't you, Chair? No, I have read it, and I would recommend that other councillors on the audit committee take a bit of time to read it. I guess I still feel like I'm a bit of a new boy on the audit committee, and what was interesting was I think some of the areas that I found challenging in terms of understanding what we do as an audit committee are flagged up in the report as perhaps being an issue which is shared by a number of authorities around the country. I think in particular there was some statistics around the scope of the audit committee and areas where perhaps we have some blind spots, and I think these really stood out to me. It was for those who are interested, it's page 42 of the report, and it said only 2 out of 30 authorities looked at partnership governance, which I would suspect things like our agreement with AIP would fall under. Is our committee clear as to how we fulfil our function there? And I think one which had already flagged up in my mind previously, and I'm still trying to get to grips with, was around value for money and best value, where out of the 30 authorities that were looked at by the review, none of them had apparently looked at value for money and best value. And I think that presents us with a challenge, is to sort of say, as a committee, how do we do that? Now, Richard, I appreciate that there's also some recommendations within the Redmond review which are targeted at you as an external auditor, and look at how you do that role differently. And I believe you're going to look at that as part of that presentation that you've got for us at the back of the document. However, have you looked at the sections in terms of what we do as a committee, and have you got any views or advice for us in terms of what that may look like going forward?
I think in terms of the council's arrangements and your governance arrangements, I think all I'd say is with the change in scope of our value for money work, and particularly under the governance heading, it is likely to be an area that we will be focusing in on this year as part of our value for money work. So I'm not able to kind of comment specifically at the moment, but I can kind of give you that assurance that with the change and increase in scope for value for money, that it is certainly something that we will look at. And also, you know, if it would be helpful, we talked about us potentially providing some more training around value for money. We could certainly look to, within that, include our consideration of the Redmond review, both in terms of the bits which impact external audit, but also the bits which impact you as a council.
Richard, if I could interrupt, I think
Yeah.
Sharon would probably like to come in and say one or two things about this, so the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair. No, it was just to let members know that obviously part of we have a statutory officer group for the council, which does include the monitoring officer, the chief executive and the section 151 officer, and we'll be discussing the Redmond review and the implications, and also we're drafting a report to come to the one of the audit committees, either the next one or the March one, you know, to give members a bit more information about the impact and what the actual, as you say, the council's doing internally. So it was just to let members know about that.
Right, thank you, Sharon. I'm sure we'll be looking forward to that, actually, because there's quite a lot of stuff in there. Well, certainly I've not read it like Marcus has, but certainly looks very good to me, actually, in terms of, right, thank you. So would you like to continue? Sorry, would you like to continue, Richard?
Yeah, was that Councillor Davis, did you have another question? Or
I mean, I was just going to say, I'm sorry, Richard, that I'm not sure me speaking should have sat in the middle of your report, but really there are these other recommendations, and I think there is a question for us, and this might play into what Sharon's looking at. You know, like the recommendations about having the independent person on the committee, you know, that's something which we've been recommended to do for some years now. We haven't done. I believe about 60% of other authorities also haven't done that. I'm quite skeptical around that as a recommendation for us. You know, yes, we want to get some extra expertise on the committee. I think that's a wonderful thing. I just don't necessarily see how we fulfill that by appointing a single individual to fulfill that role. So I think there is obviously questions here for Sharon and the officers, but I think there are questions for us as a committee, and I'll be interested to speak to the committee members about how we implement things which make us a more effective committee. Redmond review or no Redmond review, it's really just highlighted some of the things that I suspect we all have are aware of as being our inadequacies. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Yeah. So back to you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. So just picking up on the final bits of our sector update, on page 87 just covers the changes to the EO code. Page 88, report page 10, is actually a report commissioned by public sector audit appointments just around the local audit market. Myself and Gareth have discussed challenges facing the local audit market and maybe some of the factors which have driven the increases in previous years. And this market supply options review does bring out some of those trends that we've discussed previously. Report page 11, pack page 89, Grant Thornton report on housing. It was actually written by one of the partners in our public sector team. And then report pages 12 and 13, and that's pack pages 19, 91, are just two different reports on local government reorganisation from the county councils network and the district councils network, really just highlighting the signposting for your information. The final bit of the report, which starts on pack page 92, is just a bit more around those changes to value for money. And I'll just pick out a few bits just for information. So really on page 94 of the pack, report page 16, it's the reasons why it's changing. And I think, you know, the goal is to try and make our reporting more meaningful and timely, so that you kind of get maximum value from our work in these areas. And it's to kind of free up auditors and audit teams to kind of in their work really reflect local context and local issues. So overall, the changes have been brought in to try and allow us to add a little bit more value in discharging our role as external auditors. So as I said, this is moving on to page 95 of the pack report, page 17. The 3 criteria in the past were informed decision making, sustainable resource deployment, and working with partners and other third parties. So our work was framed around those areas, and now that's been replaced with a lot more specific and targeted areas around governance, financial sustainability, and improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. So I think hopefully those areas are a bit more understandable and relatable to the council's business. Page 96, report page 18. I mentioned that we're going to be bringing an annual audit letter to the next audit committee. That will be the last annual audit letter that we produce. That is going to be replaced by an auditor's annual report. And I think moving on to the next page of the report, page 97. I think the auditor's annual report will probably be a more detailed and useful document than the annual audit letter. The annual audit letter is historically kind of reproduced outputs that have been shared with the committee through the course of the year. Whereas I think the annual auditor's report is probably a lot more useful report. So what would it include? It'll have like that overall commentary on arrangements in those key areas, key recommendations coming out of our report, an assessment of progress in implementing previous recommendations, a summary if we've had to use any of our additional powers, and then it'll also include our opinion on the financial statements. The code is quite prescriptive on the manner in which we'd raise recommendations going forward. And here on page 98 of the pack, we just highlight what our recommendations will look like under the new code. So highlighting the nature of the weakness, being very clear on the evidence on which the recommendation is based, the impact we see that's currently having, and the actions that we envisage that need to be taken to address the weaknesses. So again, we're hoping that will kind of increase the impactfulness of our work. So finally, page 99 of the pack, what are the practical implications? It does involve quite a bit more work on our side. So it's something we'll be looking to start in the very near future. It's not a piece of work that we can leave until kind of after the year end. So yeah, definitely in terms of timing of our work, we're going to look to do that sooner than the value for money work might have been delivered in the past. It'll involve a richer skill mix on our side in delivering this work because it's more complex and going into more depth, and that will have an implication for audit fees as well, which is a discussion we'll be having with the finance and then subsequently yourselves in due course. So I hope that was helpful. More than happy to take questions on the value for money code or anything else in the progress and sector update. I think you're on mute, Chair.
Easier.
Yeah.
Chair, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I certainly would like to go back to one or two things, and perhaps other people as well. We've dealt with the Redden review. On page 86, is it? No, the housing, the kick-starting housing on page 89, which I think is certainly very pertinent to us because there's all sorts of things going on in the planning area that I think local councils like ourselves are uncomfortable about at the moment. And certainly your gentleman seemed to write, seemed to have written an excellent report on that. and the kickstarting housing, and also the local government reorganisation, because there is a probability that we're going into this. And for one or two of us, it's concerned us that we're in a very big area. I mean, the whole area of our county is of Cumbria is enormous, and however we split ourselves up, we're concerned that we've got about 96 or 97 small villages with, well, villages and towns with local councils. And certainly in terms of going towards, say, a unitary organisation, I think quite a few of us are concerned how we continue to service all these local councils. So we're certainly very much interested in the 2 pages written on on local government reorganisation. Now I see Marcus Campbell-Savers has got his hand up. Perhaps I should let you have a chance, Marcus. Oh,
On mute, councillor.
is he?
He is, yeah.
Sorry about that, Chair.
Not no, he's all right.
my hand went up before you raised the Kickstart housing report, so it might be that some of the councillors want to talk about that before I ask my question.
Okay. Well, does anybody want to talk about the Kickstart housing? I'd just like to make a comment on that, actually. Of course, 95% of our buildings and housing for the next 30, 40 years is already built. I certainly have a concern that this can meet sustainable standards that will be coming in with regard to climate change. And at the same time, the government has backslid to 2025 on the new build climate change recommendations, which are in our current local plan now, our adopted local plan. And of course, this was first mentioned in 2008 by the then Prime Minister, Mr. Brown, and he'd promised everybody that this will be complete by 2016. So I certainly can say that as regards housing, I'm very concerned about what seems to be going on there. Yeah. And do you have any thoughts on that at all? I mean, it seems to be a very timely report, and I will certainly read it. This the one by Paul Dossett. Yeah.
Yeah, I think really the purpose of sharing reports like this is just is for information, and you know, in terms of it's not necessarily our position to necessarily comment at this point on like housing strategy.
No, of course.
So I think that this report is more for information. If there are points of clarification within the report, I'm more than happy to either respond or take it back to the author of the report. So, but again, I mean, really including this here to signpost it to, and like I say, very happy to.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make the comment that it seems a very apt report, and I'll read it.
Yeah.
No, Campbell-Savers, I can let you get a word in.
Thanks, Chair. Question regarding on page, and I'll lose it. Is it page 94, where you touched on how is value for money work changing?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I understand under the existing regime, it wasn't the role of external audit to have a view on value for money. It was your role to ask the question, are there processes in place to ensure value for money? Under the new regime, does that change? Does your opinion broaden on that, or is it still going to remain that narrow?
I think in the past it was risk based, and so it would just, in terms of the areas where we would do detailed work, it would focus in on one or two maybe significant risk areas where and as you say, it was around specific arrangements in those places. So now the scope has widened. So it isn't just restricted to the specific risks that we identify. You know, like, so for example, last year we only looked at the financial sustainability, the stadium, and the waste contract. Now our reporting is actually going to cover commentary on all areas, and isn't going to be just on that risk base. Kind of more focused and restricted scope. So definitely the scope has widened, but I think that there still will be our work will look at the arrangements in place across these three areas. It'll include that broader commentary, and then I guess where we'll come in with our findings, rather than having that binary qualified, unqualified opinion, it will be more around the recommendations that we're making, will be like the outputs from our work. So I think that does represent a broadening of scope. There'll be commentary across all areas and more kind of broader recommendation in areas where we've found things in our work. So I think you will notice a kind of widening the scope.
Okay. Do you have anything else, Marcus, to ask?
Just I don't know if I've missed it, but I appreciate the scope's wider. I appreciate that it's not this kind of risk-based approach where you're just going to concentrate on areas of significant risk. But specifically in terms of having an opinion on value for money as opposed to having a view as to whether we have the processes, it's very different. Is it going to stay more like the latter, or are we going to see more of the former?
So what you're asking effectively, are we going to be making a very explicit
value for money judgment?
Well, I think it'll be more. I think it is always going to be more nuanced than a very direct yes or no. So I think we'll provide commentary and we'll highlight to the council's attention areas of weakness. It's a lot. I think it's a lot more nuanced than being a straight yes or no kind of very binary.
Okay. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Right, thank you very much. Oh, yeah, that's right. You've still got your hand up, Marcus. No more questions. Yeah. Thank you very much, Richard, for that report. And that brings us to the conclusion of the meeting. So I'd just like to thank everybody for taking part, and especially Paula for bearing through what seemed to be quite an onerous meeting for her in terms of the report, but I'm sure it reflects the interest of the whole committee really on what's going on in this area.
Could I just ask, sorry to interrupt.
No.
We didn't actually agree the report or the self-assessment. So could I just ask the committee to agree that?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. Right. We didn't agree item 5, and we didn't agree the following on the appendix 1, which was a self-assessment. So are we quite happy for a proposer and seconder to put themselves forward so that we can agree those?
Yes, I think there's 2 recommendations, isn't there, in the actual item?
There is in the report, I think, isn't there? Yeah.
Yes, you need to go for them.
Which Paul read out at the end, that the report is accepted subject to any additional information that the committee may require, that the committee consider the annual public sector internal auditing standards and self-assessment, which was appendix 1. So basically, are we all quite happy
Yes.
to agree those?
I'll propose those, yeah.
Right. And well, I'll second it, and I'll take it that if there's nothing more to be said, then we're all in agreement. Okay, so I'll close the meeting at what seems to be about 3:45.